All right, guys. So I'm going to play the recording for this story, and I have this story opened up in Cami, and so I'll do some active reading here. You need to make sure you do it as well. Now, the audio is under the story on Classroom. I've already just pulled it up. So.
Matthew Henson at the Top of the World by Jim Haskins. While the explorers of the American West faced many dangers in their travels, at least game and water were usually plentiful, and if winter with its cold and snow overtook them, they could, in time, expect warmth in spring. For Matthew Henson, in his explorations with Robert Peary at the North Pole, this was hardly the case. In many ways, to forge ahead into the icy Arctic took far greater stamina and courage than did the earlier explorers' travels, and Henson possessed such hardiness. As Donald McMillan, a member of the expedition, was later to write, Peary knew Matt Henson's real worth. Highly respected by the Eskimos, he was easily the most popular man on board ship. Henson was of more real value to our commander than expedition members Bartlett, Marvin, Borup, Goodsell, and myself all put together. Matthew Henson went to the pole with Peary because he was a better man than any one of us. Matthew Henson was born on August 8, 1866, in Charles County, Maryland, some 44 miles south of Washington, D.C. His parents were poor, free-tenant farmers who barely eked out a living from the sandy soil. The Civil War had ended the year before Matthew was born, bringing with it a great deal of bitterness on the part of former slave owners. One manifestation of this hostility was the terrorist activity on the part of the Ku Klux Klan in Maryland. Many free and newly freed blacks had suffered at the hands of this band of night riders. Matthew's father, Lemuel Henson, felt it was only a matter of time before the Klan turned its vengeful eyes on his family. That, and the fact that by farming he was barely able to support them, caused him to decide to move north to Washington, D.C. At first things went well for the Henson family, but then Matthew's mother died, and his father found himself unable to care for Matthew. The 7-year-old boy was sent to live with his uncle, a kindly man who welcomed him and enrolled him in the N Street School. 6 years later, however, another blow fell. His uncle himself fell upon hard times and could no longer support Matthew. The boy couldn't return to his father because Lemuel had recently died. Alone, homeless, and penniless, Matthew was forced to fend for himself. Matthew Henson was a bright boy and a hard worker, although he had only a 6th grade education. Calling upon his own resourcefulness, he found a job as a dishwasher in a small restaurant owned by a woman named Janie Moore. When Janie discovered that Matthew had no place to stay, she fixed a cot for him in the kitchen. Matthew had found a home again. Matthew Henson didn't want to spend his life waiting on people and washing dishes, however, no matter how kind Janie was. He had seen enough of the world through his school books to want more, to want adventure. This desire was reinforced by the men who frequented the restaurant, sailors from many ports who spun tales of life on the ocean and of strange and wonderful places. As Henson listened, wide-eyed to their stories, he decided, as had so many boys before him, that the life of a sailor with its adventures and dangers was for him. Having made up his mind, the 14-year-old packed up what little he owned, bade goodbye to Janie, and was off to Baltimore to find a ship. Although Matthew Henson's early life seems harsh, in many ways he was very lucky. When he arrived in Baltimore, he signed on as a cabin boy on the Katie Hines, the master of which was a Captain Childs. For many sailors at that time, life at sea was brutal and filled with hard work, deprivation, and a taste of the cat, whipping. The captains of many vessels were petty despots, ruling with an iron hand and having little regard for a seaman's health or safety. Matthew was fortunate to find just the opposite in Childs. Captain Childs took the boy under his wing. Although Matthew, of course, had to do the work he was assigned, Captain Childs took a fatherly interest in him. Having an excellent private library on the ship, The captain saw to Matthew's education, insisting that he read widely in geography, history, mathematics, and literature while they were at sea. The years on the Katie Hines were good ones for Matthew Henson. During that time, he saw China, Japan, the Philippines, France, Africa, and southern Russia. He sailed through the Arctic to Murmansk. But in 1885 it all ended. Captain Childs fell ill and died at sea. Unable to face staying on the Katie Hines under a new skipper, Matthew left the ship at Baltimore and found a place on a fishing schooner bound for Newfoundland. Now, for the first time, Henson encountered the kind of unthinking cruelty and tyranny so often found on ships at that time. The ship was filthy, the crew surly and resentful of their black shipmate, and the captain a dictator. As soon as he was able, Matthew left the ship in Canada and made his way back to the United States, finally arriving in Washington, D.C., only to find that things there had changed during the years he had been at sea. Opportunities for blacks had been limited when Henson had left Washington in 1871, but by the time he returned they were almost non-existent. Post-Civil War Reconstruction had failed, bringing with its failure a great deal of bitter resentment toward blacks. Jobs were scarce, and the few available were menial ones. Matthew finally found a job as a stock clerk in a clothing and hat store, B.H. Steinmetz & Sons, bitterly wondering if this was how he was to spend the rest of his life. But his luck was still holding. Steinmetz recognized that Matthew Henson was bright and hard-working. One day, Lieutenant Robert E. Perry, a young Navy officer, walked into the store looking for tropical hats. After being shown a number of hats, Perry unexpectedly offered Henson a job as his personal servant. Steinmetz had recommended him, Perry said, but the job wouldn't be easy. He was bound for Nicaragua to head an engineering survey team. Would Matthew be willing to put up with the discomforts and hazards of such a trip? Thinking of the adventure and opportunities offered, Henson eagerly said yes, little realizing that a partnership had just been formed that would span years and be filled with
Okay, so I'm going to answer this question on the side here because I was thinking about this when they were reading. Why does the author emphasize Henson's luck? When was he lucky before? Explain why Henson's character may have contributed to his luck. I thought about this, the captain who took him under his wing like a father. Matthew Henson must have had charisma or tact. Some people, you know how they can just say anything and people will follow them because they have that aura of easy to get along with. And Matthew Henson must have had that kind of personality. He must have had personality traits of being a good listener, being helpful and friendly, hardworking.
Exploration, danger, and fame. Robert E. Perry was born in Crescent, Pennsylvania in 1856, but was raised in Maine, where his mother had returned after his father's death in 1859. After graduating from Bowdoin College, Perry worked as a surveyor for 4 years and in 1881 joined the Navy's Corps of Civil Engineers. One result of his travels for the Navy and of his reading was an ardent desire for adventure. "I shall not be satisfied," Perry wrote to his mother, "until my name is known from one end of the earth to the other." This was a goal Matthew Henson could understand. As he later said, "I recognized in Perry the qualities that made me willing to engage myself in his service." In November 1887, Henson and Perry set sail for Nicaragua, along with 45 other engineers and 100 black Jamaicans. Perry's job was to study the feasibility of digging a canal across Nicaragua. That canal would later be dug across the Isthmus of Panama. The survey took until June of 1888, when the surveying party headed back to the United States. Henson knew he had done a good job for Perry, but even as they started north, Perry said nothing to him about continuing on as his servant. It was a great surprise, then, when one day Perry approached Henson with a proposition. He wanted to try to raise money for an expedition to the Arctic, and he wanted Henson to accompany him. Henson quickly accepted, saying he would go whether Perry could pay him or not. It was in June 1891 that I started on my first trip to the Arctic regions as a member of what was known as the North Greenland Expedition, Matthew Henson later wrote. So began the first of 5 expeditions on which Henson would accompany Perry. During this first trip to Greenland, on a ship named Kite, Perry discovered how valuable Henson was to any expedition. He reported that Henson was able to establish a friendly relationship with the Eskimos, who believed him to be somehow related to them because of his brown skin. Perry's expedition was also greatly aided by Henson's expert handling of the Eskimos, dogs, and equipment. Henson also hunted with the Eskimos for meat for the expedition and cooked under the supervision of Josephine Perry, Robert's wife. On the expedition's return to New York, September 24, 1892, Perry wrote, "Henson, my faithful colored boy, a hard worker and apt at anything, showed himself the equal of others in the party." This first expedition to the Arctic led to several others, but it was with the 1905 expedition that Perry first tried to find that mystical point, the North Pole, the sole goal of the 1908 expedition.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there. If you want to continue reading and marking up the rest of the story, you may, but I'm going to stop doing the active reading today, and I'll continue tomorrow. All right, have a great day. We'll see you.